Tonight, after the horrific attacks in Israel and now the unfolding crisis in Gaza, can anything be done to end the cycle of violence? And after the Labour Party conference, is Keir Starmer ready to become Prime Minister? Tonight, Question Time is in London at LSO St Luke's in Islington, where the London Symphony Orchestra rehearse, record and perform. This is also a solid Labour area at a local and national level. But our audience here, as always, reflects the diversity of the electoral picture across the country. Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Victoria Atkins is the government's Financial Secretary of the Treasury. Before her election to Parliament in 2015, she was a barrister specialising in serious organised crime. Yvette Cooper is one of the handful of Labour shadow cabinet members with ministerial experience. She served in both the Blair and Brown governments and is now Shadow Home Secretary. Before he was even 30, Piers Morgan was editor of the News of the World, followed by a long stint at the Daily Mirror. He's since forged a high-profile TV career on both sides of the pond, and now, just a little bit over 30, he anchors his own nightly news show on Talk TV. Halima Begum is in charge of the international charity Action Aid UK, who have colleagues on the ground in Gaza. Until this year, she was CEO of the racial equality think tank, the Runnymede Trust. And Jake Wallis Simons runs the oldest Jewish newspaper in the world, the Jewish Chronicle. His newly released book, called Israel of Phobia, examines anti-Semitism through the ages and what can be done about it. Good evening from London. Welcome to our panel. Welcome to our audience here. Great to see you here in London. Of course, welcome to you at home as well. And don't forget, you can always watch this programme on a podcast after we transmit on BBC Sounds. Now, I just wanted to say, before we start, with what's happened in Israel and what is now unfolding in Gaza, understandably, there are strong emotions on this subject. And we will make sure that all views are heard here tonight with respect. And I want to, before we take our first question, Jake and Halima, I just would like to hear your reflections on the terrible human cost in these last few days. Jake, should we start with you?
Thank you. Well, it's been quite the week. You know, in my community, it's a question of degrees of separation. And my personal degrees of separation is about 2. There's nobody who I know personally, no friends or family who've been killed or who are missing. But there are many friends of friends or family members of friends who have been killed and who are missing. And the brutality, I mean, it's one of those events where you look back to the day before and it feels like a million years ago. The brutality has been horrific. You know, babies beheaded and corpses mutilated, women raped, children raped, families gunned down in their bomb shelters. And the enormity of it, I think, still hasn't really sunk in. As a journalist covering it, it's a case of having to get your emotions and lock them away somewhere where only you know the combination and you can open it when it's all calms down. I was going to say it's all over, but that might not happen for some time. And I would just say that what it's unleashed is the hell of war, which affects civilians in Gaza, as well, obviously, as civilians in Israel. And like everybody else, I'm sure in this audience, sitting at home, everybody in the Jewish community and around the world, we all understand that every life is as precious as every other life.
Halima.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, Jake, for setting the tone of this conversation today. Like you, Well, unlike you, actually, I do have colleagues and friends on both sides who have suffered fatalities. So I work for Action Aid, which is an international humanitarian agency. We have had colleagues in the office who have had relatives killed. We have colleagues in Palestine on Gaza who are being raided as we speak. So I haven't slept for 6 days because we've been trying to manage a response. What I would say is that it's humanity that we need to remember. We need to remember the humanity in this because as we speak, from the luxury of a TV studio in East London, people's homes are being raided, 4,000 people have died so far, women, children and men. Hostages still are being taken, and we have air raids going on. So while we have this conversation about how we support Israel-Palestine, get to some peace talks and stop their violence, we need to come at this conversation with that humanity at our hearts.
Let's take our first question then on this subject from Poppy Farron.
Hi. How on earth do we solve the crisis in the Middle East after the horrific events?
Which is a massive question. Victoria.
Well, first of all, please thank you to Jake and to Halima for putting the very human tragedies of this at the forefront of our minds. The solution is a two-state one, but the way that we achieve that is not through the acts of terror that we have seen from Hamas over the weekend and the horrific stories that are revealing themselves to us as to the depths of depravity that have been enacted against innocent people going about their lives day in, day out. We have to hope that with the concerted support of friends and allies of Israel, such as the UK, we stand shoulder to shoulder with Israel. We have to hope that international organisations such as the UN can help to broker talks between the two sides, but we need to be very clear.
Can you see any prospect of that?
We need to be very clear that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, so it is with the people of Palestine that we must talk, not with this terrorist organisation. They have behaved beyond our comprehension, and we cannot and must not and will not try to negotiate with them.
Yvette?
I think it's just unbearable to see the stories of what's happened, the scale of this terrorist attack, the scale of the young people killed at a music festival, children being killed. It's just the brutality of it. And I think people are still feeling a sense of shock about that. And the impact, the fact that both Israelis and Palestinians are suffering now as a result of Hamas's terrorist attack. And the most devastating thing, I think, of all of this is that this feels that this terrorist organisation, their attack, has set back the cause of peace. And I agree with Victoria that in the end, the only way to have a long-term peace in the Middle East is to have the sovereign Palestine alongside a safe and secure Israel, the two-state solution that we have talked about, but that feels so much harder as a result of
this terrorist attack. So does that not feel further away now?
It does feel further away now. We should just be honest about that. It feels further away, but I think, though, that doesn't detract from the fact that I think all of us should still want to work towards that. And, clearly, everything that we can do, however difficult, to try and move back to that over time. But, we have to recognise this is a live situation at the moment. Israel is dealing with the fact that hostages are still being held. And, the first thing is the release of those hostages, the recognition of how damaging that is too, as well as some of the long-term things that Victoria was talking about.
Piers?
Well, I think you have to start by using the right language would be a good start with these situations. I don't want to hit the wrong tone with my host tonight, but the BBC refusing to categorise Hamas as terrorists after what they've done, I think is scandalous. And I've heard all the excuses, but you've got to call it what it is. This is terrorism of the most heinous kind. We've touched on some of the things here. Babies being burned alive. Jerusalem Post reporting tonight confirmation of these rumours that were swirling that some of them have been beheaded. A Holocaust survivor, grandmother, kidnapped and taken away, her face staring ahead with resilient determination. But my God, she survived the Holocaust and is now in Gaza, where they're threatening to execute the hostages. There was another grandmother who was murdered, and Hamas got onto her Facebook page and posted the murder so that her family would see it. There was a man on CNN today who said that his 8-year-old daughter had disappeared, didn't know what happened to her. And it turned out that she was dead. And when he was told that she was dead, he said that he was jubilant that she was dead and was not being held captive by Hamas in Gaza. Think about that. This is a father whose child has died, and he's pleased that it wasn't an alternative that is worse. So I think we have to call this what it is. I don't care what side of this argument historically you're on, and I would feel exactly the same way if Israel had perpetrated these acts on Palestinians. These are despicable acts of terrorism, and we have to start by saying it is terrorism.
And in terms of Poppy's question?
In terms of the question of whether we can get peace, I don't know how you ever forge peace with a group like this. I don't believe that decent Palestinians like what Hamas is doing. They all knew, Hamas, when they did this on the scale they were doing it, that there was going to be a ferocious response from Israel. There had to be. They're entitled to defend themselves. There will be justified arguments about what is proportionate. I don't even know how you have proportion when it comes to beheading babies. What is proportionate for that? So Israel has come under an attack in the way that America did with 9/11. So it's incredibly difficult to see where peace lies here in the near to mid-term future if Hamas remain in control of Gaza. I think you need Hamas gone in the way that we got rid of ISIS. They're committing acts of the same appalling atrocity as ISIS. I think you've got to get rid of Hamas. You've got to get back to a more stable government in Palestine, which actually wants peace. And then on the Israeli side, you've got to have leadership that also wants to forge peace. And I worry about that too. I'm not sure that Benjamin Netanyahu is the right person anymore to do that. So I think you need fresh leadership. But how you get there in the mid to even long-term future, right now it looks almost impossible. I'm very sad to say that.
Okay. The man at the front here in the blue switch.
If Hamas ask it, is the British government willing to release prisoners? There was some discussion in the Eye that a Hamas leader has said that they might request North American and European governments to release some prisoners back to them.
So a prisoner swap.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that. I haven't read that article, but what I do know is that the British government stands shoulder to shoulder with Israel, and Hamas is a terrorist organisation. You know, the reason what Hamas are doing, and it is the most chillingly cynical thing that they are doing, they are deliberately placing themselves in places where civilians are, so that when Israel rightly defends itself, Hamas knows that it will be civilians who are suffering.
The man at the very back in the striped shirt.
Everyone agrees that Hamas is a terrorist organization, but in terms of the tone, as Piers mentioned, about certain news outlets, for instance, a BBC headline had Israelis being killed and children in Gaza haven't died, like they just died magically or something. So there needs to be a responsibility as well to hold certain acts that the Israeli government might take that are not disproportionate to account, because at the end of the day, they're human lives as well.
Okay, and the woman a little bit further down, yes, with the glasses, yeah.
As you've correctly pointed out, Hamas being a terrorist organisation, Palestinian government has actually come out themselves and condemned Hamas as in not representing their views or beliefs at all. Their sole priority is the protection of the innocent Palestinian civilians. And also the Home Secretary came out earlier this week and actually tried to condemn the presentation or waving of the Palestinian flag, associating it with Hamas. However, Hamas's flag is very different from the Palestinians. The Palestinian civilians, the innocents, the more than 2 million innocent lives that are still there who are trapped as a result of this conflict. And again, just to brush up on the point that the gentleman made as well, just alone today, about 500 children, and the numbers are still climbing, have been killed. There was a report earlier from a doctor/surgeon who works in a hospital in Gaza saying that because the electricity is cut off, newborn babies on life support are dying as well. The UN themselves actually published a report detailing the number of Israeli deaths and Palestinian deaths from a period of 2008 to 2020. There were 5,600 Palestinian deaths recorded in comparison to 251 Israeli deaths, and over 115,000 Palestinian injuries in comparison to 5,600 Israeli injuries. And I'd just like to know how anyone can explain that, please, because... Okay.
Jake, so obviously there's the point made by the woman there, but also there's Poppy's question, which is how on earth do we solve the crisis in the Middle East after the recent horrific events?
Well, I mean, you know, Hamas is very nice to hear everyone calling them terrorists, which is what they are. Not only are they terrorists, but they share an ideological root with ISIS and with Al-Qaeda in the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think we've all seen that today. There's been, in the last few years, certain elements, particularly on the political left, in the Labour Party in the previous Labour administration, had a very soft view on Hamas. Jeremy Corbyn famously called them his friends and said that it was a historic mistake to call them terrorists. Well, I think the historic mistake was made by him, because they've been revealed to be using exactly the same methods as ISIS. Now, that's what we've got in Gaza. On the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, who you mentioned, you say they've come out and condemned these actions. I have not seen that. I saw, certainly on the day of the event, of the atrocities, they said they supported them and said that it was an act of resistance. So I'd be interested to see your source there. But the...
should we let her reply?
Actually, just on the BBC the other day, actually, the ambassador for Palestine actually came out and on an interview on live TV to basically say their priority is solely protecting the Palestinian civilians. They condemn Hamas. Hamas does not speak for the Palestinian government or the people.
I mean, you're right that there's a big rivalry between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. They had a civil war some years ago. But the president of Palestine, the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, did support the attacks, saying that they were a reasonable act of resistance. And he is serving the 18th year of his 4-year term in office. Democracy does not exist on the West Bank. It's a corrupt and brutal authoritarian regime that enacts awful acts of violence on its own citizens as well. So what I'm trying to say is that Palestinians, I'm not saying, are extremists as a people. There's an extremism in their leadership which is not serving them well. I've got an old colleague of mine, I used to be a foreign correspondent, I've got an old colleague of mine in Gaza right now, and I spoke to him just a couple of days ago, and he said that on the ground in Gaza there's a big support for Hamas, but there's a sizable minority of people who, as he put it, can't see the point of it. Understatement of the century. They understand that Hamas has unleashed this hell of war on the heads of their own civilians. And until this problem of extremism is solved, it's very difficult to see how peace negotiations can happen. What I would favour in the meantime is a doctrine known as shrinking the conflict, which the former Israeli government was trying to apply, which is, without having a grand plan for solving peace in the Middle East, let's try and make things a bit easier in the meantime. Maybe on the Palestinian side, removing some checkpoints, easing some restrictions, whatever you can, confidence building, so you can eventually edge to a point where peace negotiations can take place on the principle that in Israel, 70% of people agree on 70% of the issues. Let's look at what we can agree on. I think that kind of pragmatic step-by-step approach may get us to a point where peace negotiations can happen, but right now that feels further away than ever. Right now, there's a war because of this horrible jihadi atrocity that Hamas has committed.
Now, Jake, you're here on the panel, obviously, as editor of a very long-standing and widely read Jewish newspaper. It has come to my attention, a tweet that you put out just a few days ago, which you then deleted, which has offended many as Islamophobic and has used terms I can't actually repeat here on this programme. So I want to ask you, do you still stand by it or do you apologise for it?
Well, why can't you repeat it? It's not Islamophobic at all.
Well, that's not the view that many have taken. It has used language that I'm not comfortable with.
It was jumped on by a lot of critics.
Well, I think let's just hear what Jake has to say, if you don't mind. Well, we have strong guidelines for good reason about things we can and cannot say on television. I'm not comfortable.
What I would say is that it was in response to pictures of crowds of people in the Palestinian areas and elsewhere celebrating these atrocities, dancing, singing, handing out sweets, and experiencing great jubilation. And what I said was that was a brainwashing that's a problem. And these are people who are celebrating the butchery of my people, and that is a problem. Now, the problem is not...
But I'm asking you, because you deleted it, I'm just asking, do you stand by it, or do you think it's the wrong thing to say?
The problem is not that they're Muslim. The problem is that they've been brainwashed by these jihadi fanatics. That is what I said. That is what I said. I said they were brainwashed.
Muslim culture is a death cult.
No. I said they were brainwashed. I said brainwashed.
I have the tweet.
Brainwashed by a death cult. And I said many, but not all. And I stand by that.
You said much of Muslim culture is a death cult.
I didn't.
That's what you said. Those are the exact words.
Well,
I'm quoting the tweet.
I didn't.
Let's let him answer. Thank you.
But what I would say is that that's untrue. But what I would add is that people got cross about it, and I understand that. But I look back at some of the tweets I sent around the same time. And around that same time, in fact, on the same day, I believe, I responded to somebody else who was tweeting, Islam is the problem. And this is what I tweeted. You can check this too. I said, this is untrue. Many Muslims are wonderful. Many have even fought and died for Israel. Let's come together as people of good conscience and stand against the darkness. I've got Muslim friends. I stand with Muslims. Any death of any innocent civilian is abhorrent, and if it's unintentionally, it is beneath contempt, whoever's doing it.
All right.
What I'm saying is that the brainwashing of jihadi fanatics takes place and is a bad thing. And I did delete it because tempers are so high, and I didn't want. And I'm. What I will say is that I stand by the point that these jihadis are brainwashing elements of society. But if you're offended, sir, and if I've offended other people with a clumsy wording, I certainly apologise for that. I want to be friends and allies, not enemies.
Halima, Jake, thank you. Halima, let's get back to Poppy's question, which you asked. How on earth do we solve the crisis in the Middle East after the recent horrific events?
So I think it falls on those of us who are not directly impacted by this crisis to be calm and measured and bring both sides to the table to discuss, have dialogue, and actually have a dialogue with a view to having a just solution. The solution has been on the cards for a long time, of course. You only have to look at the UN, a two-state solution that actually respects the national aspirations of both sides, but also guarantees the territorial or the security of civilians. That is the solution that we are looking for. But if we have a conversation all around the emotions that are at play here, I fear that we will not get to that place to discuss a just solution. What I'm more concerned about at the moment, Fiona, is actually the sequencing of humanitarian support. So while we have had Hamas literally shoot 1,000 rockets, Israel has responded with an air raid. We have 2.2 million people stuck in Gaza at the moment. And actually, some of the hostages are also in Gaza. So indiscriminate bomb raids is going to lead to more careless and, well, death and violence. So we need to think about the humanitarian solution before we get to the root causes of this conflict and what a just solution is. And actually, I'm quite interested in asking our minister here, what are we doing to ensure that the British government is working hard to open up a humanitarian corridor so that actually medical supplies can come in and out of the country? As a lady said, that there aren't enough medical supplies to treat casualties. If there were a lack of supplies in Israel, I'd be asking the same question, that we need to get the medical supplies in. The second question I have for our government is whether we will look to ensuring that humanitarian aid continues to Gaza, because only a few days ago the EU had a knee-jerk reaction and discussed stopping aid to Gaza, and in fact changed its mind. So we need to make sure that we are not discussing knee-jerk reactions to what is a devastating humanitarian crisis that is unfolding, and it won't stop unless those of us who are not directly affected can bring about some calm and some solutions around the table very quickly.
Yvette. So, will you work to ensure that there is a humanitarian corridor, and will you also work to ensure that aid gets into Gaza?
So I just want to, if I may, pick up one thing. There has been nothing knee-jerk about the UK government's response to this. The Prime Minister spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu over the weekend. The Foreign Secretary was amongst the first foreign ministers to visit Israel. Yesterday, our Defence Secretary is with his NATO counterparts to discuss what NATO can do in this and other areas. And so there is a very, very clear, measured plan of support for Israel. But I bring it back again to the fact that Hamas has created this. Hamas is the ones
You've
who
made
have...
that point very eloquently, Victoria, but Salima's asking specifically about will you provide aid into Gaza?
So
will you try and ensure there's a humanitarian...
We stopped directly funding Palestinian authorities several years ago because of concerns about the administrations at the time. We continue to send aid to international partners, including the UN. None of our UK money goes to Hamas. And we know that. The reason we keep emphasising this is because Hamas is not Gaza. The people of Gaza are being let down very, very seriously and badly by Hamas. And we will always make sure that that money is properly spent. One of the most disturbing reports I've heard today, though, and I know not whether it's accurate, is of Hamas deliberately dismantling water pipes in order to build missiles. And so this goes to some of the chilling cynicism that we are seeing from this group of people. We cannot lose sight of that in all of this very, very difficult conversation that we're rightly having.
Man there in the white shirt.
I have a son living in Tel Aviv who regularly has to go to the bomb shelters. I have many family and friends whose children are being called now into reserve duty. Everything changed last Saturday in this discussion, everything. I have been a massive advocate for reconciliation and not revenge, reaching out to Palestinians, to Arabs in much of my life. I can't see how right now, firstly, the condemnation didn't come at all from the Palestinian Authority. Nothing, not a word, not a single word saying, not in my name, nothing. I can't see how now Israelis who are living in fear are going to be able to get over...
But let's...
I can't see...
We're going to let everyone's voices be heard, so please let him finish.
They're going to be able to move forward to get this trauma for generations. I'm just lost for words.
OK, no, Victoria, sorry. And I hear what you say. Thank you very much for making your point. Look, there's a lot of you with your hands up, and we could talk about this for the whole hour. There are other questions you submitted, and I am going to come to them. We will come back to this subject, I don't doubt. Next week, very likely the week after, for some time, I suspect. So I'm going to draw a line under it here, but noting that we will come back to this subject. So thank you for all your points. Thank you to the panel. Before I move on, I just want to tell you that next week we're in Lisbon, in Northern Ireland, and the week after that we're in Bradford in West Yorkshire. So if you'd like to be part of our audience, you'd like to come and make your points, go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and we will see you on either of those programmes. Right, let's take another question. From Kyle Nash Baker.
Are Labour ready to govern?
Are Labour ready to govern? Well, Yvette, I'll come to you.
Well, we don't know when the election is going to be, and we know we have to keep working to earn every vote. But I think we saw from Keir Starmer this week somebody who is ready to be the next Prime Minister, and a party coming together, ready to set out plans for the next government to deal with the fact that, I feel really after 13 years of the Conservatives, it does feel like everything is broken. And we've had, they crashed the economy, we've had weak growth, we've got the record high NHS waiting lists now, we've got rapists and burglars not being put into prison, the latest news today. And just the sense people have that public services aren't there for them anymore if things go wrong. That is a terrible thing, with the cost of living crisis underpinning all of it for people to feel. So what Labour was setting out, what Keir Starmer was setting out, was a plan for us to get our country's future back, to get Britain's future back, to be able to have investment in the green technologies, in the jobs of the future, and making sure that the taxpayer gets benefit from it, and making sure that we cut our energy bills as part of it. Plans to get waiting lists down, to make sure kids can get a dentist appointment again, which in many parts of the country you just can't get, and to get more police back on our streets, more neighbourhood police back on our streets, and to tackle the appalling knife crime that is killing our children. There's so many things we're going to debate, and of course we've set out how we make sure that we can fund things at a time that is tough for the country, but
have you set out how you can
I think
fund it,
yes, we have. We have. Just let me finish the point for a first.
All right, then I'll come back.
We'll just say that, you know, in the end, we cannot afford 5 more years of this chaos. So yes, I think Labour is ready to form the next government, and Labour is setting out a plan for a much better future for our country.
Okay. So some is not that clear how you're going to pay for it. So the 1.5 million homes, for example, how much is that going to cost, and where's the money going to come from?
So, in order to set these homes, some of this is about planning, some of this is about affordable housing, some of this is about getting new towns going, and also bringing in a lot of private sector investment. There are people willing to invest in the new homes of the future and making sure that you can build them, but too often there's huge long delays in the planning process. That means that the homes just don't get built. And Michael Gove didn't even spend the affordable housing budget. He actually gave billions of pounds back to the Treasury. Well, we would make sure that money would be spent on affordable homes, because otherwise, to be honest, I think there's going to be a lot of parents thinking their kids are living with them forever because they can't afford to get a home of their own.
And the 13,000 more neighbourhood police officers, what will that cost and where will that come from?
So, the Police Foundation have set out a programme where they identified £700 million of saving from requiring the 43 different police forces to work together, to join their procurement together. They identified £700 million. We were more cautious than that. So we identified £360 million as a result, and that would fund additional police officers and PCSOs back into our neighbourhood teams, because at the moment, although the government, under pressure from everyone, started to finally reverse their own huge, massive cuts to policing, they haven't put them on the streets. So you will still not see the police on the streets. There's still 10,000 fewer neighbourhood police on our streets. That's what we'll turn around.
Jake, are Labour ready to govern?
Well, I mean, I suppose the main concern from the point of view of the Jewish community here is whether Labour has got rid of anti-Semitism in its party. And I've got to say that Keir Starmer, all credit to him, he has taken some tough action, and he has largely fulfilled his promise to root out anti-Semitism from the party, as far as we can see. There's some of it in the fringes, in local councils, in the grassroots, that is true. But certainly in the parliamentary party, on the whole, it has been rooted out. However, it is difficult for me to look beyond the fact that Keir Starmer was the longest-serving shadow cabinet member behind Jeremy Corbyn and campaigned to try to get him into number 10. If Keir Starmer and his colleagues were more effective in their campaigning, we could have had a Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn with Keir Starmer in his cabinet. And so, you know, this U-turn is welcome, and I applaud him, but it's indicative of various other U-turns he's conducted as well, on nationalisation, NHS outsourcing. Okay,
so you're not convinced?
Credit. So, look, I want to believe him, and I want to trust him, and he's done a good thing, put it that way.
OK, I'll come round, but I'll give you a chance later, if that's all right. The guy there in the dark blue shirt?
Hi there. After successive Labour coalition and Tory governments wasting an unbelievable amount of public money and seeing that money down the drain through poor spending decisions and misappropriated funds, what would a Labour government actually do to tackle that, to actually plug the holes that are in the bucket rather than raising taxes and just pouring more water into it? Because I don't believe the simple answer as an undecided voter in the next general election that removing the Tories solves the problem, raising taxes solves the problem. I think as a general public we have the right to actually see that the wastage is actually dealt with, and there's just a stronger level of governance in how our money's spent so that we get more bang for our buck and more success out of what we're putting into the kitty.
OK, I will come back to you a bit on that. Yes, the person there in the I think you're wearing black, are you there? Yeah. Yeah, no, further towards at the side there.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Firstly, thank you to everyone for the great sensitivity with how you've treated the topics tonight. In many ways, I do feel for Yvette here, because Labour both have the largest open goal that they could possibly have with how shocking the Conservatives have been in the last few years, but also the most questions posed to them. My main question to you is, how do you put faith back into the hearts of working class people when you have a leader of the opposition who can't seem to back striking workers, who can't seem to back working class people in layman's terms.
Then I will give you a chance to answer this. Piers, are Labour ready to govern? That's Carl's question.
Well, look, we're in the heart of Arsenal country, Islington here. How many gooners in tonight? Little show of... Oh, a lot of you, good. Keir Starmer's a big Arsenal fan. I'm a big Arsenal fan. He reminds me a little bit of our club and our manager, where 2 years ago I wouldn't have given Mikel Arteta a prayer of winning the big prize, the Premier League, but he's grown into the role and he's now exuding an air of someone who believes he can, and I think he will. And when I watched Keir Starmer with his big speech this week, I thought, yeah, this guy has grown into his role and he now believes that he can be Prime Minister, and he's got a good team around him, and I think they exude an air of basic competence. And he may not be the most exciting guy out there. I mean, nor's Rishi Sunak, to be honest. But what I like about both of them, they at least look like they take their job seriously, and they understand that with these jobs of high office in this country should be a basic modicum of dignity and an ability to make us proud of our country when you represent us. So I give them both kudos for that. I think Labour have got it all to lose. But how are they going to pay for these promises? This country is on its knees financially. I mean, I didn't think things could get worse than people not being able to get a bed in hospital. Now we can't even find a bed for convicted criminals. Think about that. Our prisons are full. That moment, to me, just summed up the malaise of this country. And I think what we're crying out for is a leader that can make us all feel better about ourselves. I've been saying this for a while, and people go, oh, well, it's easy said than done. It is, but the way you do that is you don't make pledges you can't keep. You don't do stupid stuff like Boris Johnson. You don't do crazy stuff like Liz Truss. You do the basics and you do them well, and you listen to the people, and you bring the people with you, and you make us feel proud of this country again. And if you do those things as a leader, then as Arteta has shown at Arsenal, you can bring the fans with you, bring the team with you, you can win. And I think I saw with Keir Starmer someone who takes that responsibility seriously, and therefore I think he has a very good chance.
Halima.
Is Labour ready to govern? Yes, of course, Labour is ready to govern. I actually have a soft spot for Keir. As he was Crown Prosecution Director many years ago, as a family who were victims of crimes, he stepped up and really supported a process of extradition from another country to actually see that we got justice. So I have a soft spot for him. That said, I think he's playing it too safe. He's very good, by the way, which is why Boris Johnson is personally attacking him, if you remember the accusations around Jimmy Savile and not acting fast enough. So he's very good, which is why he's being attacked. But for me, he's playing it too safe, and I'll tell you why. This country, as you say, Yvette, has been on its knees for years and years and years. It's for Labour to win, but it's going to take more than safety. He's got to get out of his comfort zone and think about what this country needs, rebuild Britain back. What's that going to take? Where's the money going to come from? I'm old enough to remember actually Gordon Brown making pledges around 3 million homes, was it? Or David Cameron saying 200,000 homes. But where's the money going to come from? And I'll tell you where the money will come from. It won't just come from tinkering around with inheritance tax. It won't come from tinkering around with social care budgets or where we fudge the budget. It can actually come from the excess profits that a lot of the oil and gas companies are making profits around. Tax those companies, find the money, get Britain back to a better place. That's where the boldness needs to come from.
In the blue shirt and dark blue jacket with the glasses. No, that over there. Look, there you go.
Yeah. I think it's been said Keir's speech and plans lack detail. For health, he's just announced 1.2 billion for waiting list initiative. Do you really think that's the priority in health? Isn't the stalemate over doctors' pay a priority? Because until that's sorted, the waiting list just keeps growing.
You're going to have a lot of questions to answer about, but I will come back to you, Victoria. Yeah. Is Labour ready to govern? Go on, surprise us all and say yes.
So I think, I'm sure one thing, actually, that we can all agree on is that character and values are essential qualities in a leader and in what we aspire to as a Prime Minister. And Rishi is, He has an absolute commitment to our country. He works his socks off day and night to try and look after us all. And he is the very story, I think, of the opportunity and promise that our country offers people. And I'm sorry to go back to the previous subject, but I'm afraid I can't shake it off because I think these events in Israel have been so terrible. But the problem I have with Keir Starmer and his character is, as Jake has said, he sat round that shadow cabinet table with Jeremy Corbyn. And I remember a Jewish female Labour MP having to be given a police escort to go to her own party's conference, Labour conference. And Keir sat round that table and said nothing. Compare and contrast, if I may say so, with Yvette, who refused to serve in his cabinet. A point of principle, she stuck with them. But I am afraid he may well have made changes since he's taken leadership, but the choice for him was when he chose to urge all of us to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. And had he succeeded, had he got his way, then Jeremy Corbyn would have been the one making the decisions about what happens with the UK's response to Israel at this today, last weekend and next week. And that I find very, very worrying. Now, putting that to one side, we can talk about policies, we can talk about priorities. The number one issue facing our economy at the moment is inflation. Inflation hurts all of us. It particularly hurts the poorest in society. And that is why the Prime Minister has made halving inflation his number one priority. And since the peak last year, we have already reduced inflation by 40%. We are beginning to see food inflation reducing, so your supermarket shops will get a little bit easier. And alongside that, because we were so very worried about the cost of living pressures, we have helped the average household with some £3,300 to help get over that very difficult winter that was caused last year by primarily by the war in Ukraine. But as I say, for me, character and values are the things that matter in a leader. And I'm afraid on this, Keir Starmer has legitimate questions to answer.
OK, you've made your point.
Which he has refused to do.
Now, Yvette, you've got a few things to answer here. That, but also the man there talked about, basically, as you put it, tackling the holes in the bucket rather than just keeping on chucking stuff in. And then 2 points really about the doctor's strike and supporting the doctor's strike, which is the point you were making at the back there.
So let's start with Victoria's claims and allegations. I think, look, it shows that the sort of desperate state the Conservatives are in, that they are trying to attack Labour's past rather than actually what Keir Starmer is doing in the Labour Party today. And I think, you know, the Labour MPs that you talked about, and it was devastating that some of them left the party. Yeah. And it's as a result of Keir's work, they have now rejoined the Labour Party, and I am very proud that they have done so. It was awful what happened, but it's really testimony that Keir has made the biggest of changes in the Labour Party. He was meeting with the Chief Rabbi today. David Lammy and I were meeting with the Board of Deputies, the Community Security Trust in Golders Green to talk about what we need to do to keep tackling anti-Semitism in our communities. And the huge change that Keir Starmer has made in the party. And, Jake talked about Jeremy Corbyn, who is not a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party anymore.
Hang on. Sorry, you're going to have to... Please stop shouting out. I'm really sorry. Other people have their hands up.
I understand that there are...
That's how we have to do it here on the programme. Let her answer, please. Please stop shouting out. It's just not fair to everyone else who's got their hands up.
I do understand that people have their views, but let us be clear. Keir Starmer has made huge changes in the Labour Party, and I think we should welcome that.
And the other point?
The second point was about how do you fund things and the waste. And what Rachel Reeves, our Labour Shadow Chancellor, talked about this week was the shameful scale of waste, for example, on the PPE contracts, where the government has stopped even going after them. I mean, there was corruption involved, there was all sorts of really dodgy stuff that went on, and actually there's been no proper action to get that back. Setting up actually a whole process to try and go after that money, setting up an office for value for money, that to do that proper assessment to make sure that you get proper scrutiny of things. We've set out a whole series of areas where we would save money. That's why we've said we're the additional police officers and PCSOs we're talking about would be funded effectively by savings.
Okay,
so I think you're right that you have to get value for money and you have to make sure that we spend every penny of taxpayers' money wisely, because people really are feeling really stretched at the moment.
And will you spend it on the striking doctors?
The final question. The money that we've sent out, over £1 billion, is about cutting waiting lists. And when you hear the heartbreaking stories of people who are in desperate need of cancer treatment and are not getting it because of the long delays, because of the huge waiting times, what we're setting out is funding in order to make sure you can get the weekend
but you're being asked specifically, will you support striking doctors?
What Wes Streeting has said repeatedly is we would get round the table. We would have got round the table a long time ago to try and prevent the strike action and try and pull everybody together. But there's no alternative to also getting the overtime and to getting the additional appointments in place if you want people to be able to get treated.
All right, let's
Yeah, just on that final
very
point
briefly,
about
because I want
doctors,
to move on, take another question.
We went through the independent pay review process, a process that has been in place for 30 years, including through the last Labour government. It is an independent process. They came up with a figure which we accepted, 6.6%. That means that junior doctors will be seeing a significant rise in their pay. Their average pay is around, with overtime and so on, between £52,000 and £54,000. A consultant, an average consultant's salary is £130,000, and they have, rightly, a very, very generous pensions policy, which we've changed the law. We changed it at the last budget. Labour voted against it. We changed it at the last budget to remove the tax barriers that were existing with those pension schemes, so that we could keep more consultants in the NHS.
Okay, no, Victoria, because the question was
when we enter the
more
room.
broadly about is Labour ready to go? I'm not.
Yeah.
We've talked many times about doctors striking. You wanted an answer from Yvette. I think you've got as good an answer as you're going to get. Let's take another question. So we've got about 12 minutes left. I want to try and get it in from Imogen Otley. Hi, Imogen.
How are the political parties going to help young people like me get on the housing ladder?
Do you mind me asking, how young are you, Imogen?
I'm 16 years old.
Whoa, so you are planning ahead, Imogen. I salute your ambition. But this is something, even at 16, you're worried about?
Yes.
Worried about being able to afford?
Yes, because I'd like to go to university, and obviously that comes with a humongous amount of debt. And with the increasing price of houses and the lower increase of wages, it's just not meeting the price. And
you're worrying already at 16?
Yeah.
Piers?
You know, it's really interesting. I've got three sons. One's 30, one's 26, one's 22, and they all want to get on the housing ladder. And it took me back to when I was in my 20s. And I bought a house in Morden, in South London, with two friends. And one of them reminded me today that we didn't pay any deposit at all. We had a 100% mortgage. One of the fathers acted as a guarantor, and that was it. It was that easy. And for my sons, just in the early talking to see how we get their financing, you've got to have a minimum 25% deposit. And I was shocked. I didn't know it was like that. That's a lot of money, whatever value house you're buying. And many people just simply can't afford this. So I then talked to a friend of mine who's a property developer, and I asked him about this plan by Labour with the housing, and especially affordable housing. And he specialises in affordable housing. And he told a story that I found just really shocking. There's a development that's been going through planning now in East London, very near here. 1,600 new homes, of which nearly half are affordable homes. It's been a 4-year delay in that planning, even though the planning officers supported the scheme, and it's been rejected by a small committee of 8 local councillors, who he believes, from his experience, just don't understand the complexity of this kind of development. And he says that's happening everywhere. So when Keir Starmer says he's going to bulldoze his way through local planning issues, that's what he means. And he's right. The truth, if you're a young person like you, and I commend you for planning so far ahead, but it's incredibly difficult to see how you could buy a home. And what moved me about Keir Starmer's speech was when he talked about the value of your own home to people's psyche, to their health, to their social mobility. And once you get on that ladder, you feel like you've arrived. And we are depriving potentially millions of young people of that feeling. And I think that is a real tragedy. And that's why whoever wins the next election in this country has got to look at people like you and my sons and others who are trying to do this and empower them to have their own home. And I think that would be great.
Let's hear a little bit more from our audience. Woman with the glasses then.
Yeah. Hi, Imogen. I wish you had a vote at 16 because you talk a lot of sense. Really. I just can't get over the Tories thinking they have character and value. It's just absolutely laughable. I'm not talking to the individual, I'm talking about the party. And luckily, we do vote in parties. So whatever your view of Keir Starmer, we voted in Boris Johnson. Then we had Liz, and now we've got Rishi. You know, we vote in parties. Tories, I'm a teacher, my husband's a police officer. We've got 3 beautiful children here in London. And it's not just because we've got 3 children that we're tired. We struggle every month to make the ends meet.
OK.
So good luck.
Man here in the orange sweatshirt.
Yeah, I truly struggle to understand how the Tories believe that they are helping young people with housing when, you know, Liz Truss's shock to the economy. The Conservative MP mentions a 40% reduction in inflation. Did Liz Truss's government not skyrocket inflation beyond what anyone else in Europe has observed? Is it not ludicrous? I can't believe that Piers made a speech which advocated for the Labour Party on the grounds of basic competency. Is that not a shocking indictment of our current government?
OK. Let me take one last one going back. This woman here in the front.
Yeah. Hi. Over 52% of this country are women. Are we sure that Labour is ready to govern when it spent 4 years denying that a woman is an adult human female?
Great question.
Punishing women.
It's an interesting question, but not the one that Imogen asked. If you'll forgive me, I'm gonna stick with that. Forgive me. And then also, I've got about 7 minutes left, and I've got to let the panel answer Imogen's question. So forgive me. So, Victoria, first of all.
Yeah. So, Imogen, first of all, thank you for your question. And look. We all acknowledge how difficult it is for young people to get onto the property ladder. If you look at, and I don't want to seem discourteous to Piers, but I suspect house prices, when Piers was looking at houses with his 100% mortgage, which, goodness me, after the financial crash, we cannot go back to that sort of model. I suspect.
Are you being ageist there?
I'm not. I'm just
Minister?
being. I'm trying to be courteous. I suspect the houses in Morden were a little cheaper than they are nowadays. And what is important is really helping first-time buyers onto the property ladder. So we're helping.
What you're hearing is the man saying you're not helping.
For example, we have we've completely removed stamp duty for first-time buyers up to a certain value because we do not want to put that extra cost onto people as they're buying their first home. But one of the important things is to build new homes.
And you're nowhere near building as many homes as
actually,
you've pledged
we're on track to deliver our manifesto commitment to deliver 1 million homes this Parliament. We are absolutely on track. We have delivered.
I mean, the Housing Minister, Robert Jenrick, said you're nowhere near it.
We are on track. We delivered 2.3 million homes since 2010, and of course we've had schemes throughout the decade helping first-time buyers with some of the cash flow issues that Piers, I'm not meaning to be discourteous, that Piers has mentioned. But what worries me about some of the things that we heard from Sir Keir this week is that I live in a very rural constituency, so I don't have the pressures that places in the southeast tend to have with, for example, protecting Greenbelt and so on. It is, I think, really important that we have local democracy playing its role when it comes to house building, helping councillors make the right decisions about developments in villages and market towns, rather than the top-down approach, bulldozing through local opinion that Sir Keir seems to have been advocating. That worries me, because I think, we have to have local consent to these projects around the country.
I'm going to stop you there because I've got 5 minutes left. I need to let the rest of the panel answer. Halima.
Thank you. Look, it's really easy to talk about housing figures just before an election. It's really easy to make promises, but we've been there with Gordon Brown. We've been there with the Conservatives. These new houses don't appear. I'm going to give you a statistic, Imogen. So currently there are about 5 million households living in unaffordable homes in the UK. At the rate of building, it will take about 200 years, I think, to build all the homes that could be affordable. Not in your lifetime, Imogen. My nephew, who lives down the road in East London, he drives a delivery van. There's no way he's getting on the housing ladder. He works in the gig economy. But even if your parents were able to support you with a housing deposit, you know, what about their pensions? There's nothing left in the pensions. So we do have to think about getting any new leader, any new government back to being bold. The money has to come from somewhere. It has to be followed through, maybe some kind of shake-up of the oil companies possibly. So you can't just ask the same question decade after decade without seeing results.
Jake.
Well, with an increasing population, we do need new houses. The situation is dire for young people. Keir Starmer announced a target of 1.5 million new homes over 5 years, which is roughly the same as the Tories' target. It's a target which the Tories have not been able to hit ever so far, because the obstacles are huge. Planning regulations, environmental regulations and so on. Now, Keir Starmer said that he would be able to achieve it when the Tories haven't been able to. He didn't lay out really how. He said, he used some metaphors, he'd bulldoze regulations, he'd become a YIMBY, a yes in my backyard, rather than a NIMBY, no in my backyard, or a KNIMBY, a certainly not in my backyard. And I think that a lot of people at home will look at that and be reminded by the old Jewish joke of the person who received a telegram which said, start worrying, details to follow.
Let's have some details then, Yvette. How is Imogen going to get on the housing ladder?
We do need to build more homes, and we need more affordable homes, and we need more support for first-time buyers. We would do all of those things. There's been a drop in home ownership, but there's also been this big increase in not just people your age, but also 10 years older than you and even more, still living with their parents because they can't afford. They can't afford often to rent, as well as not being able to afford to buy their own home. And you've got, you know, people who did just about manage to get on the housing ladder and working incredibly hard to do so, then hit as a result of that disastrous mini-budget last year with, thousands of pounds of extra mortgage payments as a result of Liz Truss's chaos. And, you know, we did see, frankly, last week in Manchester, Rishi Sunak really dancing still to Liz Truss's tune. Rather than saying, no, we're going to change direction, they've still dropped actually some of the targets, some of the policies that they did have in place to try and drive housing growth.
But in terms of what Labour's going to do with it.
So when
Keir Starmer talks about bulldozing through planning laws, does that mean ignoring local democracy? So if local people feel strongly they don't want somewhere in their backyard, as you put it, that gets ignored?
No, what we need is local councils, local people, communities to be able to decide where in their areas homes should go. So actually all areas should be thinking responsibly about increasing the housing that is needed in the area, but the location should be decided through proper plans. But a whole load of local councils
So when you say proper plans, you mean at a national level?
No, local plans. It's the plan that decides in each area, OK, which area is going to be identified for housing, which area is going to be identified
but they exist
for something
already.
else. Well, a whole load of councils don't actually have them in place because the whole process has been so slow. We would speed up that process so you get those plans in place.
But
that means you can then take decisions more quickly.
Did say sometimes we may have to ignore what people want locally.
So what he said was you've actually got to speed up that process. So if local councils are refusing to build housing at all, then actually there should be measures in place to ensure that all areas are doing their bit as part of the affordable homes we need. Otherwise, we are letting the next generation down. And yes, we would also, as part of that, ask areas to come forward with proposals for new towns, because actually the post-war Labour government and generations did build new towns, new communities, new places that people can enjoy and live, and we should have those sorts of ambitions again. But yeah, it does mean working with local people, but to give young people the best chance of getting a home of their own.
Imogen, good luck, and thank you for your question. And come back on the programme, I don't know, when you've left school, tell us what happened. We'd like to know. Our hour is up. Thank you very much for watching. Just to remind you, if you can't stay up till this time on BBC One, you can watch us on iPlayer at 8 o'clock. Thank you very much to the panel for coming along. Thank you, of course, to all of you for coming along here to LSO St Luke's this evening. Great to see you. Thank you at home for watching. Until next week, bye-bye.